Okay, let me make sure I get myself situated here. I think I have one audience member. Awesome sauce. So my name is Christine Brin. I'm Associate Curator of Education here at the Maritime Museum. Over the last few years, I have had the joy of studying a lot of great North Carolina associated history. And one of the things when you're studying major figures like Blackbeard the pirate is you also have to take a look at the legends and stories and how modern culture such as movies or commercials have really influenced that history. And it's been a very interesting study for me. And I've taken that interest and kind of taken it to Santa Claus here. Um, Santa Claus is an interesting case of studying because modern culture has very much influenced the way we see him today and how he's changed. Santa has actually been documented as helping children in one form or another for over 1,500 years. And what we're going to do in this presentation is look at how he's changed over that time. So just as a person changes their clothing, their hair, and sometimes even their names, Santa is no different. Over the past 1,500 years, Santa has had many names, looks, and even jobs beyond just delivering toys every December. Interesting fact about Santa is how universal he truly is. Almost as soon as his stories start showing up in Turkey, it can be seen showing up in places like France, Spain, Germany, and even beyond. The story was likely spread through many different avenues, but we see a lot of the stories, such as that of Blackbeard or mermaids or dragons, being spread through the maritime industry. These sailors were literally traveling the world, and along with delivering goods, were delivering news and information. So it is very likely that they were also delivering information and tales of Santa Claus and helping to bring him around the world. The earliest documentation of Santa goes back about 1,500 years to the 4th century. Going by the name of St. Nicholas, the documentation states that St. Nicholas gifted a widow with dowries for her 3 daughters. At this point, interestingly, St. Nicholas was not associated with the celebration of Christmas, but instead with his feast day on December 6th. He won't become associated with Christmas until later, and we'll touch on that during this presentation. Almost 100 years later, during the Middle Ages, we see Santa undergo his first significant transformation as his story moves into Holland. Most notably, he will now go by the name of Sinterklaas, and he will ride a white horse to deliver his goods. In France, Santa, called Père Noël or Father Christmas, is seen starting the tradition of only leaving gifts for good little boys and girls. In this tradition, children are expected to leave treats in their shoes, as you can see here. These treats are kind of like carrots, are for Père Noël's donkey that he uses to help deliver his gifts. In exchange, the good children find gifts left in their shoes the next morning. Around 1830, we'll see the Pennsylvania Dutch settlers in America start introducing the name of Kris Kringle. Now, something I do want to point out is Santa has many different names, as you've seen already: Père Noël, Kris Kringle, Sinterklaas. These names do not replace their predecessors. They're kind of used synonymously for this gentleman. So they are all ones that are still in use today, but the first use of names such as Kris Kringle that you see here, it aren't documented till about the 1830s. The name of Father Christmas was actually first recorded in the 15th century. Interestingly, Christmas at this time was a much more adult celebration. This merrymaking and adult style celebrating led to people trying to abolish Christmas, the celebration of Christmas, in about the 17th century. At this point, Father Christmas was still kind of independent from Santa Claus, but in the 17th century, when they were trying to do away with the celebration of Christmas, we see the character of Father Christmas actually helping to defend the celebration of Christmas, and ultimately becomes combined with Saint Nicholas when the celebration of Saint Nicholas gets moved to the day of Christmas. And this is about the time in the 17th century when we see Santa becoming, or St. Nicholas becoming, associated with the celebration of Christmas. So while Christmas was celebrated previous to this, it was not celebrated in the fashion that we associate it with today. And it definitely wasn't as associated with the celebration of children as it is today. So about the 17th century, we see Father Christmas defending the holiday, the celebration of Christmas, and then also getting combined with the legend of St. Nicholas, and becoming a step closer to the holiday that we know today, with Santa Claus and Christmas kind of going hand in hand. So we see these three different versions of Santa Claus, that of St. Nicholas, Sinterklaas, and Father Christmas. As I said, they're combining to start to create the Santa Claus that we know today and the holiday of Christmas that we know today. But in the 1800s, we see some of the most dramatic changes to both Santa Claus's appearance, which makes sense. I mean, after a few hundred years, he was ready for an outfit change, and also to the way he was operating. He had previously, as I said, been either riding a white horse or a donkey, and we're going to see he's going to have to change his mode of transportation as the world gets bigger. So here are two big changes that come initially in the 1800s. So first we see Washington Irving in 1809. He introduces St. Nick to America. Updating, he is the one, so he decides to bring St. Nick to America as a Dutch tradition, trying to keep these traditions alive. He actually, when he introduces the character of St. Nicholas, he updates the look of St. Nicholas, giving him kind of that bigger belly and that girth that we associate with Santa Claus now. But interestingly, he puts him into a green coat and makes him into more of a Dutch sailor type. Not many people realize that the current look that Santa Claus is sporting has some sailor influences over the design of it. So he brings the character of St. Nicholas, updates the look a little bit, gives him a green coat as opposed to the red robes that had previously been associated with him. And then in 1823, we see one of the biggest influences over the information that we have about Santa Claus. And that is that of a visit from St. Nicholas. A visit from St. Nicholas, today we know it as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And this story actually introduces us to a lot of the modern description we have of Santa Claus, along with a lot of the associated information that go with him. This is where we first hear about reindeer pulling his sled. This is where we also the first time we hear about him being associated with elves, and that's because they call him a jolly old elf. The red outfit itself does not actually come to be his. It's not showing up on Facebook. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. Yeah, we're sharing a page I manage. Yeah, but if nobody was listening. Yeah. Oh, I see Helen is on there. So Helen, I'm sorry. Just hold on one moment. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty right now. We might just start over. Okay, so it's saying, oh, because I didn't click go live. That's why. I thought I had done it. So you know what? I'll start over from slide 1. Do you guys mind? Oh. Okay, so we're going to start over from slide 1. Do. And is it showing up on Facebook now? Awesome. Okay. Okay, can you guys still see me okay? Cool. We are going to go for try number 2 at this. As I made it, well, I didn't make it too far. I only made it into the 1800s, so hello again. My name is Christine Bryn, and I'm Associate Curator of Education at the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort. Now, over the last 10 years, I've had the joy of studying North Carolina's maritime history. And one of the things that when you study history, you also have to take into account, like if you study somebody like Blackbeard, you have to take into account the effects that modern culture and pop culture have over the way we perceive that history. So when I studied Blackbeard, I also take a look at how things like legends and stories and information, or even movies, have influenced the way we think about pirates, and information that we thought of as fact may not always be. So as I've looked at that, I've also taken a lot of the practices that I have from studying people like Blackbeard, and I've kind of turned that to our guy here, Santa Claus, because Santa Claus has a really interesting history, and there have been a lot of influences over him over the last 1,500 years, from things like movies and commercials, even, or legends and stories, which have changed our perception of him and the way that he looks and acts. So what we're going to do during this presentation is actually take a look at some of those things that have influenced him and how he's evolved over the last 1,500 years. So as I said, Santa has been documented as helping children in one form or another for over 1,500 years. Just as a person changes their clothes, their hair, or sometimes even their name, Santa is no different. Over the past 1,500 years, Santa has had many names, looks, and even jobs beyond just delivering toys and toys every December. Interesting fact about Santa is just how universal he has become. Almost as soon as history shows him showing up in places like Turkey, he's also seen showing up shortly after in France, Spain, Germany, and beyond. Now, with legends such as, or stories or information about figures such as Santa Claus or Blackbeard, or um, ongoing things, we see this information really traveling the world through the maritime industry. Sailors are literally traveling the world, and they deliver the goods that are on their ship, but they also deliver news about the places they've been, and they share that information or where they've lived. And it's very likely that along with sharing news and information, they were also sharing information about Santa Claus, aiding in this kind of universal aspect of the information about him and the story of him. The earliest documentation of Santa extends back about 1,500 years to the 4th century, not 14th century, the 4th century. Going by the name of St. Nicholas, the documentation states that St. Nicholas was gifted a widow with dowries for her 3 daughters. At this point, interestingly, St. Nicholas was celebrated on December 6th. He was not associated with Christmas yet. That won't come until the 17th century, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But at this point, St. Nicholas was still celebrated December 6th. Uh, about a couple hundred years later, during the Middle Ages, we would see Santa undergo one of his first transformations in Holland. Most notably, he would now go by the name of Sinterklaas, and he would ride a white horse when making his deliveries and visits. In France, Santa, here called Pierre Noel, is seen starting the tradition of only leaving gifts for good little boys and girls. In this tradition, children are expected to leave treats in their shoes, like carrots, like what you see here. Help if I remember what direction point in, like you see here. And in exchange, they leave the carrots out for Pierre Noel's donkey. And in exchange, the good children will find gifts left in their shoes the next morning. Around 1830, Pennsylvania Dutch settlers to America would start introducing the name of Kris Kringle. So while it was probably used before the 1830s by these settlers, it wasn't documented until the 1830s. Now, something I do want to point out is these different names that I'm mentioning in the way of Pierre Noel, Sinterklaas, Kris Kringle, Santa Claus. These are all names that are still in use today. It's not like they unveiled a new name and they got replaced. These are all names that are kind of used synonymously with this for the same guy. So today, depending on where in the world you are, if you go to France, you'll still hear about Pierre Noel kind of thing. Uh, the name Father Christmas was first documented as being used in the 15th century. Interestingly, though, in the 15th century, Christmas was not actually, as I mentioned earlier, associated quite yet with Santa Claus or gift giving. It was actually a very different celebration than what we think of as Christmas today. The celebration of Christmas in the 15th century was actually very adult, and that merrymaking and adult style celebrating actually led to people trying to abolish the celebration of Christmas in the 17th century. At that point, we actually see the figure of Father Christmas. You can see his image here, being used to try and defend the holiday. And it's also at this point that we see the celebration of St. Nicholas being moved from December 6th to Christmas, and kind of combining Father Christmas, which was a figure, as I said already, with St. Nicholas, and making them almost into one person and changing the uh, kind of the focus of the holiday from adult merrymaking to that of children, something we more associate with Christmas today. So we see the celebration of Christmas evolving more to what we see today in the way of being more child focused, but we also see our big man here. He's slowly evolving and becoming what we associate with Santa Claus today as well. So as I said, we have these three figures, that of St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, and Father Christmas, now coming together and slowly starting to create that modern image we have of Santa Claus. But in the 1800s, we're going to see some very significant changes being made to Santa Claus. And that will come from these two directions mainly. So in 1809, Washington Irving, and that's the gentleman here in the green, will actually introduce Saint Nick to America. He will bring the story of Saint Nicholas to America, and to try and keep a lot of the Dutch traditions alive with people living here. And what he will actually do, interestingly, is update the look of Santa Claus. He will talk about a new look for him, where he will describe him as having the big round belly that we come to associate with Blackbeard today. And then, not Blackbeard, I'm sorry, Santa. We come to associate with Santa today. And interestingly, he will also describe him as being in a green coat, not red, like had been seen with significantly before, especially with St. Nicholas. So you'll see him in a green coat, and also described as an outfit that has more of a Dutch sailor influence. Not many people realize that Santa's modern day outfit has a lot of kind of maritime influence, and that it is supposed to have kind of that sailor feel to it. In 1823, we will see one of the most dramatic changes come, or evolutions come, to Santa Claus, in that the publication of the story of A Visit from St. Nicholas. We know the story today as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, but this story will introduce us to a lot of the information that we associate with Santa today, and that includes the 8 reindeer. It also includes one of the first times we see the association with elves, when Santa is called a jolly old elf. So it's really a big change to the story as it comes up into the 1800s there. And what about that red outfit that we've come to associate with Blackbeard? I did mention that Irving put him in green, and Blackbeard. Goodness, I keep saying Blackbeard. Santa. What is with the red outfit? Where is it? And up until 1881, Santa will actually be, we'll see Santa in a lot of different colors: blue, green, purple, brown, but and red occasionally, but not exclusively red as we see today. And that won't happen until about 1881. And that's because of this gentleman, Thomas Nast. In 1881, Thomas Nast will create the new, more iconic image. He'll actually illustrate that image, and you can see here, of Santa Claus, along with giving him that now kind of iconic red color that you see there. You're also going to see that smiling face. Up until now, they've been Father Christmas and St. Nicholas have had kind of a stoic face. But you're going to see there's apple red cheeks, that long white beard, and the plump figure that we heard from Irving earlier. So this is where you start to see the image of Santa really coming into more of a modern feel of what we associate with him today. Now, Thomas Nast had illustrated Santa a couple times, and if you look in the top of this slide, that black and white image is one of the earlier illustrations he made of Santa. So you can see just between the two of them, Santa has seen some significant changes to his look in the way of his clothing and his even his facial expression. In 1931, we'd see another significant change to Santa's image when Coca-Cola would commission an illustrator named Hayden Soundblom to paint Santa Claus. This portrayal gave Santa a more human image to him. Up until now, he'd had like that very cartoon, almost like face, very happy. But in this case, we're going to see Santa more, most notably with laugh lines and wrinkles. He's, you know, he's over 1,000 years old. He's probably getting on in years there. Time to have some wrinkles. And then Santa has not been limited to only books and paintings. Up until the early 1800s, we were seeing him primarily being influenced by those books and paintings and stories and such. But once TV became a big thing, we start seeing Santa showing up on TV. A recent study has actually documented over 99 movies and more coming out every year that star the big man in red. The first movie starring Santa Claus actually came out in 1898, and it featured some cutting-edge special effects. If you get the chance to go onto YouTube or see this, it's really cute to watch. This Santa Claus 1898, I think that's all you probably have to search. Interesting fact is the guy that actually created the movie had been a stage hypnotist, and they say that a lot of his experience as a hypnotist and with stagecraft influenced how he did his special effects, kind of giving it that cutting edge feel to it for that time period. Santa's even been known to make appearances in many TV shows, going as far as outer space with Doctor Who, as all the way to NCIS with Abby, as you see there, or to New York with Friends. So he's all over the place. While Santa is best known for his love of cookies and milk, it is not uncommon for him to be seen enjoying different treats in commercials this time of year, which also influences that story of Santa and how we perceive him. Now, Santa is great. He really is a great guy and has done a lot. But with the changing and growing world, he couldn't possibly do all of this, delivering all the gifts, creating all the gifts, and monitoring everybody, all the children of the world, all by himself. Throughout the world, Santa has many different helpers. And in truth, I couldn't possibly cover all of the helpers in one presentation or one article there. But what I want to do is go through and give a couple quick slides and mentions of some of the more notable and well-known helpers of Santa Claus, starting with Mrs. Claus. Now, Mrs. Claus we first see her appear around 1849. It appears well, as I put it, it appears Santa fell in love and got married around 1849 because at this time is when we see the first mention of her in a short story called A Christmas Legend. And just as with Santa, Mrs. Claus has undergone many changes to her look and occasionally even her name. The only thing that has remained consistent about Mrs. Claus is the support and assistance that she offers Santa in his annual undertaking. Now, I mentioned that nobody can actually agree on her name. She's pretty consistently called Mrs. Claus. Some movies do give a, um, a, a take at her first name, but nobody, like I said, can actually agree on it. But she is consistently shown being a great support for her. As I mentioned earlier, the connection between Santa and the elves was first made in that 1823 story, A Visit from St. Nicholas. From there, his association with elves just exploded. Elves have been given thousands of different looks, also giving credence to the theory that there's multiple types of elves depending on their jobs or what they're doing. And most recently, we hear about the elves on the shelf, and you can see the picture there that have started assisting Santa in keeping track of the children and helping them out. With the growing world, it is no surprise that Santa's transportation also needed to evolve. In the 1823 publication, A Visit from St. Nicholas, the public were first introduced to the original 8 reindeer um, that pulled Santa's sleigh. And then in 1939, we actually see the addition of Rudolph by a Chicago writer named Montgomery Ward, who shared the story of Rudolph. And then you can see here, these are two kind of iconic films that focused on those reindeer. We've got Prancer, which is probably my favorite Christmas movie, I'm going to be honest, from 1989, and then Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from 1964. Now, an interesting thing is while many, especially here in America, are familiar with the names of the reindeer, very few can actually name all 8 of them. So what I'm going to do is give you a second. Let's see if y'all can name all 8 reindeer. Frankie, you can try? Nah? So there you go. It's Dasher and Dancer, Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid, Donner and Blitzen. I usually don't make it past Vixen. And then obviously we've got the addition of Rudolph. And then I do want to include here the addition of Olive. She was added a few years ago by a movie where she was supposed to be Olive, the other reindeer. So those are two reindeer editions, plus Elf on the Shelf franchise does talk about the reindeer that you can adopt and that will help Santa out as well. But there's many more than 8 of those. So these are the 8 original plus the 2 that were added by later. So there are some that believe there is a connection between Santa and the Norse god Odin, with some even claiming that they are the same person. While I personally find it hard to believe they are the same person, there are a lot of interesting connections connections in that they have similarities between their legends and their stories. My favorite being that Santa had 8 reindeer to help pull his sleigh, and Odin had a horse with 8 legs to help, not obviously pull his sleigh, but to help ride. Now, the Yule goat. I want to mention this because the Yule goat, when I studied him, it has no actual connection to Santa Claus. The reason I want to mention the Yule goat is because it has become kind of a Christmas Easter egg for me in a way. The Yule goat is a Scandinavian and North European Christmas symbol and tradition. Traditionally, the Yule goat is actually made from the last sheaf of grain harvested, and they save it for Yule or Christmas celebrations. This little goat, like I said, has become a kind of Christmas Easter egg for me because when you watch Christmas movies or you look at Christmas represented in commercials. This little goat shows up in the most random places. And I'm wondering if people like include him not quite understanding why he's associated with Christmas or not. But keep an eye out when you're watching Christmas movies or you see commercials or even ads in publications. He shows up in the most random places. Merry versus happy. As you are probably aware, some people say Merry Christmas and some people say Happy Christmas. And I actually looked into why there is this inconsistency. And the reason for that is early on, happy was the idea of happy was a higher class connotation in that it was. So the word happy was supposed to be associated with a state of mind. So you were happy, but merry was associated with kind of what you were doing in action, your merrymaking. So happy had this kind of higher class connotation, whereas merry was a little bit lower class because you were merrymaking, you were being a little jovial. And so that, and with that rowdiness, that would be associated with the lower classes. So when America apparently chose to adopt the lower class version of the saying when we started saying Merry Christmas as opposed to Happy Christmas. No matter what, I hope you have both a happy and Merry Christmas, but we're not. Christmas flotillas and parades are an interesting tradition that are actually more recently started. While the practice of parades, military or otherwise, have been around for hundreds of years, the first Christmas parade wasn't actually documented until 1887. And interestingly, it was a flotilla. It was actually a series of boats. But 1888 and beyond, it became more of a down the main avenue on the road parade as we associate it today. So 1887 is when we see the start of the tradition of the Christmas parade, which is pretty cool. Now, the Christmas flotilla, I guess you could argue that that 1887 boat parade was the first Christmas flotilla, but it really has become a much more of a recent practice. We see it start really here in the southeast, and it's slowly starting to progress out to other coastal areas. The Crystal Coast Flotilla, which actually just happened this previous weekend, started in 1992, so it's been going on quite a while. So obviously, there's a lot more to the story of Santa Claus than what I've covered here. He's a big man with a big story and a lot to tell. I just gave you a quick overview of how he's evolved over the last 1,500 years, what he's been up to, and it's really, I look forward to seeing what the future holds for him. So I want to wish everybody a happy and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So thank you for joining me.